Hello, my friends. Welcome to this very quick tutorial about the Stacey complexity model. Now, I heard that in the study group, you kind of had questions about it. Well, why don't we take a look at this, because it's exactly the same concept as page 14 in the Agile Practice Guide. So if you take a look at the screen here, we have to the left, close to agreement. That's on the y-axis. Close to agreement, far from agreement at the top. We're talking more about the requirements on the y-axis. So let's draw that here so that you know which axes I'm referring to. This is the y-axis, right? This represents requirements. It could also represent a number of other things. So in PMI's Agile Practice Guide, they have requirements on certainty, they call it, but they have on the x-axis technical degree of uncertainty. That way. So whether you're talking about close to agreement about requirements or close to certainty on requirements, or close to certainty on technical, right? Or far from certainty on technical, the concept is the same. This is always saying two parameters, technicality and requirements. So the more certain you are about the requirements, the more predictive you should be. I mean, why wouldn't you be? Why would you use something else when you know pretty much all the requirements? So you're going to be here in this zone of simple if you're working on close to agreement and close to certainty. You get it? Close to agreement in the requirements, close to certainty regarding the technicality. Get it? Makes sense? Good. So what we're saying is that in this zone, the projects you're working are going to be more predictive in this zone down here. These are going to be your predictive type projects. And it's as simple as that. That's all that's trying to say. It's just trying to say that if you're working on stuff that is close to certainty, close to agreement, you're going to be predictive. Think about that for a second. All right, so now you understand that. Let's take a look at what happens if you begin to move into further from agreement and further from certainty. Let's take a look at that and think about it for a second. As you begin to move in that direction, further away from certainty, you are going to be moving into the middle of the chart over here. And this means your project is more complex. See? So what does it say in the Agile Practice Guide? It says, those simple projects, linear approaches work well for predictive, but as you're moving away, adaptive approaches work well in that complex or complicated region. And that is where you need to be thinking about some morphing of the worlds. No one is saying use entirely agile or entirely hybrid. No. That's not what we're saying. All we're saying is that the likelihood is you need to think hybrid. You see, there's no hard and fast rule. It must be hybrid. It must be agile. It must be predictive. No one's saying that. So you got to assess it for yourself. But from what I'm seeing, the more you're moving towards the middle, you are likely to be better off using a hybrid model, right? Perhaps you find out you need to use more agile than predictive. See, so as you're going into this orange zone here, you're beginning to think about agile concepts, either morphing to some degree with predictive, or maybe going all the way to the end, the right side of the image, which is total anarchy. Maybe that's where you need to be on your project, because that's what the project is. It's craziness. Maybe you need to be right over here. You get what I'm saying? So if you take a look at the Agile Practice Guide, it is no different. What we're trying to say here is Waterfall works best when requirements are well understood and there's little chance of change. Agile works best when there's high variability and the need to experiment to discover the best solution when change is likely. And that's okay. So take a look at page 14 one more time and see if it makes sense for you, right? We're just saying that projects that are chaos, crazy, you're much better off using an agile approach for those. So if you read what the PMI have said here, it says some projects have considerable uncertainty around project requirements and how to fulfill those requirements using current knowledge and technology. That's what they mean by technological or technical degree of uncertainty. And that is figure 2-5 and page 14. All right, so now that I've explained it to you, I want you to read page 13, page 14, and page 15. Now, going into life cycle selection, which you also remarked, that was a little bit complex for you, talking about complexity. I want us to draw out this concept that is in the Agile Practice Guide for you. And this concept is one of hybridization, right? If you take a look at the Agile Practice Guide on page 19, what you're going to see is the image 3-1, and it's called a continuum of life cycles. So before I go to talk about predictive and iterative and incremental, let's take a look at that really quick. So here it is, the continuum of life cycles. Follow me to page 19. We're going to read something really quick. It says, no life cycle can be perfect for all projects. Instead, each project finds a spot on the continuum that provides an optimum balance of characteristics for its context. Okay. So when you boil this down, the PMI have taken the Stacey complexity model and they have distilled it into this rather interesting chart or diagram, which has predictive, incremental, agile, and iterative. And in this map, we can see when it is best to use predictive, incremental, agile, or iterative approaches. So let's get that straight first, okay? Let's examine them one by one. Predictive, this should be easy to understand. It means you can largely predict the outcome of the project, and as a result of great planning, you should be able to get to your goal by using a plan-driven approach. You plan it out. But this is when the frequency of delivery is low. In other words, you're probably delivering one time, and the degree of change is low. So take a look at these two parameters. I'm going to box them for you so you know what I'm talking about. When you have a low frequency of delivery, see that? Low. And you have a low degree of change, low, right? Looks like the Stacey complexity model. That is a recipe to use predictive. Get it? When you have a low degree of change, but a high degree, high frequency of delivery, this is when it is better to use incremental. When you have a low degree or low frequency of delivery, but a high degree of change, see that here? That is a good recipe for iterative. Low frequency of delivery and high degree of change. Because what you're working on has some changeability, but it is not going to be delivered in increments. It's going to be delivered once. So you are repeating in cycles until it is correct. Make sense? Last but not least, we have Agile, which is great for when we have a high frequency of delivery and a high degree of change. That is when it is best for you to use Agile. Now, when we talk about it's best to use Agile, we're not saying it has to be one or the other. And this has been talked about quite a lot in the Agile Practice Guide. All we're saying is the likelihood is that on this continuum that you're looking at, right here, See the continuum? The likelihood is that if you have a high frequency of delivery and a high degree of change, then you are better off being on one of these sides. And the side you want to be on is more to the right. See that? And we're not saying you have to be entirely agile. We're just saying more agile would make sense. Add more agile. And maybe you realize we need to be 90%, or we need to be 100%, or we need to be 95, or we need to be 60. It depends. On the flip side, when you take a look at a project that is largely predictive on the continuum, you could be somewhere towards the middle, or you could be here or here. And that's okay. All one is saying is know where you should be on the continuum. Analyze your project, assess it, and understand. This is one of the things that's talked about in the tasks in the content outline. You got to assess, should I be more predictive or less predictive? Okay? So that's the continuum of life cycles. And I want you to think about that for a few moments, because next we are going to page 18, one of my favorites in the Agile practice guide. And I think it's a great page for any project manager from the old world. When I say old world, I mean the world before Agile was, the world before the PMP guide encapsulated it. Get what I'm saying? So on page 18 of the Agile practice guide, you have this pretty interesting table. It's table 3-1. And this is what table 3-1 looks like. On table 3-1, you can see all of the methods we just looked at represented. We have a predictive approach to project management, which is plan-driven. The requirements, of course, are fixed. Can they change? Yes, they can, but it has to go through very heavy change control. The activities are performed once for the entire project. The delivery is a single delivery at the end, and our goal, you know, is to manage costs. That's why we have heavy change control. Contrast that with Agile, which is a change-driven approach or adaptive approach to delivery. The requirements are not fixed. We can change the requirements without a lot of red tape, as long as the product owner or whoever is responsible sees this as adding value to the endeavor. We can swap things out of any of the backlogs. We can remove things altogether. So it really depends. In the world of Agile, we keep on hammering away at things until they get done well. We repeat until correct. We understand that there's going to be technical debt. We understand that we're going to have spikes where we need to go off and study and do some experiments to come back and do it properly. So we repeat until correct, and we have frequent small deliveries at the end of each sprint. And our main goal is value. In fact, we call the product owner the chief value officer, because their chief aim is to get that value crystallized in the sprint and to get it delivered to the customer, to the business unit, to the end user. So when we talk about the team in the world of Agile, especially in Scrum, you got to remember we have developers, the Scrum Master, and the product owner, and those make up the team. But our main goal as the team is to get that value into their hands as often as possible. Remember the concept of the MVP? So I hope this is making sense so far. Let's go to the last two. Iterative. Iterative is very similar in delivery to predictive. It's a single delivery. Now, iterative means we are doing it until it's correct, again and again in cycles, repeating it until it's correct. And we are quite obsessed with the correctness of the solution. It has to be right. But when it comes to the requirements, this is where it is different from predictive. In the world of iterative, our requirements can change. they are dynamic. And when the requirements change, the deliverable that you initially thought was going to be a particular way, it could change. That's all right. It's iterative. Remember, our goal is the correctness. We want that solution to be what is fit for use and conforming to the requirements we're given, and those requirements are dynamic. Last but not least, we've got incremental. Incremental just means frequent, smaller deliveries. In this one, we are really concerned with speed. Let's get it into the hands of the customer quick. The requirements are again dynamic, and it is performed once for a given increment. And that, my friends, hopefully clears up the questions you had from the study group. As you run the study group, just remember you've got more than enough quizzes, more than enough information, more than enough stuff from the Praizion repository. I wouldn't recommend watching the plethora of video that you folks have access to, but what I would recommend is ahead of time, send out those topics so that people can come prepared. All right. I wish you all the very best on your WhatsApp group, and let me know if you need any help. Bye for now.